Will the Supreme Court end birthright citizenship? Today we're going to break down exactly how most pundits think this case is going to go. Tomorrow's the big day, April 1st. It's not a joke. The Supreme Court is going to hear oral arguments in the Trump versus Barbara case, which, if you're interested in this topic, I'm sure you already know a fair amount about it. Trump seems a little bit worried. He went up yesterday on Truth Social, lied all over the place. He said something about dumb judges are really bad for the country or something. I mean, he's insulting the justices before they've even asked question number one. But and when I say he lied, he came right out and he says, we're the only country that does birthright citizenship. Well, that's not true. Canada does it. Mexico does it. In fact, I made a whole list of them. Costa Rica, Panama, 10 of the 13 countries in the Caribbean do it, like Jamaica and Cuba and, what am I thinking, Barbados. South America, it's almost all of South America. It's Argentina, it's Brazil, it's Chile, it's Ecuador, Peru, Paraguay. There's a whole slew of countries. Venezuela, a lot of countries do it. Most of the European countries don't, but on this hemisphere, almost all of them do. The biggies do. Us, Canada, and Mexico, Brazil. I mean, the big countries do, and even the little tiny ones do it. So, I don't know what he's talking about. Well, this is because he doesn't read his daily updates that he gets. He doesn't care. He just opens his mouth and says things. Yes, I know, I do have a bias. So I've already explained this Trump v. Barbara, including why it's called Trump v. Barbara, in a different video, which I will link at the end. That'll be the end screen, and you can click on that if you want some additional information. Now, one of the things that's important to remember is that there's not going to be a decision tomorrow. Tomorrow is just to hear oral arguments. However, you are going to have a pretty clear indication of how the justices are leaning based on the questions that they ask. So this video is going to give you a little synopsis of each of the justices. What do they care about? You know, we talk about the conservative, there's 6 conservative, 3 liberal, but what do they really care about? A lot of people think this case is just about Trump not wanting children who are born to undocumented people to get U.S. citizenship. But it's a whole lot more than that. You know, it's not just that. And you have to think like a lawyer, which all these justices are. You have to think like a lawyer a little bit. Look, there are two types of Supreme Court justices, or I should say judges in general, or even attorneys in general. There's the strict constructionalists, also known as strict textualists. I always call them strict constructionalists, if I can say the word. Their viewpoint on this is that you have to look at what the founding fathers wanted. You know, what was the intention of the founding fathers when they wrote this part of the Constitution? Or in this case, it's the 14th Amendment. The founding fathers did not write this particular amendment. They wrote the first 10, also known as the Bill of Rights. They wrote those first 10, but this one was written right around the Civil War. And so you have to look at a lot of things. You have to look at what the legislature talked about, you know, what they talked about, what their concerns were, what kind of things were put into the record when trying to decide whether to pass this amendment. You have to look at what was the intention at the time that this came out. That's the strict constructionalist people. Generally, they're the conservatives. Generally, the conservatives are also them. The other folks are, I had to look up the term for it because I didn't even know that we had a term because I fall under this group. The living constitutionalists, they're called. And that just means that we believe that the Constitution is like a living, breathing document. And that it's going to change with the times. It's not stuck in the 1700s. It's going to change. And I also point to the fact that the founding fathers, when they created the Constitution, they made a way for the Constitution to be changed. Meaning you can make an amendment and change it. And we've had 20 plus amendments already done. So the founding fathers knew that this was going to have to be changed in time. It shouldn't be locked in time. Generally, the liberals fall under that category. So, what exactly is the question? In this case, this Trump v. Barber case, can a president limit birthright citizenship with an executive order? Now look, the justices might frame it in a different way, but that's the bottom line. That's the reason this is not just about immigration. I mean, think about it. Just because he doesn't like this particular amendment, can a president come in here and just, with an executive order, change stuff? Do you like your Second Amendment right to be able to own a gun? We could have a president for 4 or 8 or 12 years from now that says, I don't agree with that. And I think, just like Trump's saying right now, I think that the law has been misinterpreted. So we're going to get rid of the Second Amendment. Or the Second Amendment is going to mean, yes, you can own a gun, but you can't own this, or you can't do that, or you can only have this many guns. If you don't like that scenario, then you shouldn't like this scenario, because that's exactly what this president is trying to do with an executive order to change the interpretation of settled law. If you're concerned about this case and you've been following some things, you have heard a lot about that phrase in the 14th Amendment that says, that the person has to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And what does that mean? Is it narrower than that? I mean, the liberals are certainly going to say, wait a minute. The Supreme Court already addressed this. This was an 1898 case, United States versus Wong Kim Ark. Again, if you've been watching anything about this, believe me, you've heard about this case. I mean, it's been the law since 1898, over 120 years. So, and basically it ruled that a child who was born in San Francisco to Chinese parents who were not citizens, they decided that he was a U.S. citizen because he was born in San Francisco. Like I said, that case has stood for 125 years. Let's real briefly talk about what the legal arguments are going to be. Orders of limiting birthright citizenship are going to argue that jurisdiction means full political allegiance. Now, in my other video that I'm going to link at the end, I talked about that, about how crazy, that there's, you're going to say that somebody who's here illegally is not under the jurisdiction of the United States? They can't, the cop comes up to arrest him for something, a simple assault or a DUI or a who knows what, and he says, you can't arrest me. I wasn't born here, so you have no jurisdiction over me. Of course not. Of course they have jurisdiction over anybody who's in this country. The conservatives are going to say that it means that they don't have full political jurisdiction over these people. And the argument that I've heard is an example of that would be you can't tell someone who's here without documents that when he turns 18, he's got to sign up for selective service because he doesn't owe any allegiance to this country. However, every male U.S. citizen has to sign up for selective service. Every male permanent resident has to sign up for selective service, but not folks who are here without papers or people who are here on student visas. So that's part of the argument that the conservatives are going to say. Now, on the other hand, and the opponents to this are going to say, wait a minute, Wong Kim Ark already addressed this. This has been settled law for a long time. But here's an important twist. And it's the thing, I haven't heard too many people talking about this. It's the thing that I think is going to be front and center on the minds of the justices. And that's if whether a president can change what the law has been, what precedent has been. Can he do that unilaterally? He just does an executive order and there you go. I mean, if you have a Supreme Court case that comes down, like the Dred Scott case, for instance, which is how the 14th Amendment ended up becoming a thing. You know, the Dred Scott decision was a horrible decision, and, you know, nobody was happy with it. And so the Congress created this new amendment. And there's this whole process, which I've also already discussed in this previous video, about if you don't like something that the Supreme Court has done, then you're more than welcome to do an amendment. And there's a whole process for doing that, and it's not easy. I mean, to this day, the ERA has still not been approved. So it's not an easy thing to do, but if you want to change what the Supreme Court said, there's a way to do it, and that's called make a new amendment. You don't just say, you know what, I've decided I don't like this amendment. I'm just going to change this. It's been in all these years, it's been interpreted wrong. You wouldn't like it if they came after the Second Amendment, right? If some liberal president decided to change the Second Amendment, you sure as heck, you know, if you're on a conservative side, you sure as heck wouldn't like that. So, have to be careful. So anyway, let's get to the meat of this. Let's go justice by justice, right? We're going to start with the liberal justices because they're the easiest ones. Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, Ketanji Brown Jackson. They're almost certain to vote against this executive order of President Trump. And they're going to talk about, again, Wong Kim Ark. This is why everybody else keeps talking about it. This has been a precedent decision for 128 years. You have civil implications. You have a mother who's giving birth in the hospital in one room. Her kid is a U.S. citizen. The mother in the other room, her kid's not a U.S. citizen. Now, this would not be retroactive to every single person who ever was born to undocumented people. But it is going to be retroactive according to, because I sat down and read this executive order while I was making up the script for this. And it says in the order that it would apply to children born after 30 days of the order. And the order was issued January 25th, 2025. So what's that date? If somebody was born after February 24th, 2025, to someone who is on a temporary visa or somebody who has no paperwork whatsoever, it could and probably would affect those folks, those children, I should say. So what's the overall big prediction for the liberals? They're going to vote in favor of maintaining birthright citizenship. Now, for the so-called conservative justices, number one, Justice Clarence Thomas. You know, he was always very quiet. He didn't almost, I mean, forget it, it was for like, I don't know how many years. He like never asked question number one. But over the more recent years, he's been a little bit more verbal. So we'll see what he has to say. However, he has openly argued that the court should reconsider flawed precedents, which is, you know, that's what Trump's side is going to say, that Wong Kim Ark was a flawed precedent. So if anybody was going to be willing to revisit that particular case, it's going to be him. But this is rich, isn't it? This is rich, in my ever so humble opinion. You know, I mean, here's a black guy who's married to a white woman. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not. You should. If not, you need to learn a little bit more about history, our history. Loving v. Virginia, decided in 1967. It was a 1967 landmark case, civil rights decision, Supreme Court decision, by the way, that held that the laws banning interracial marriage violate the equal protection and due process clauses of the 14th Amendment, which is interesting. It's the same amendment, right? Different clauses. So we're talking about different clauses. But you know, down in the South, a black and a white could not marry each other. And so this guy who's married to a white woman thinks that maybe you should reconsider some of these decisions. That would be rich. However, just not to be nice to him, but you gotta explain. Not to be nice to him, but you have to explain certain things. Even Thomas separates constitutional meaning from executive power. Frankly, I think the justices are a little ticked off at how much power grabbing Trump is trying to do. Because we do have checks and balances in this country, and I think they're a little ticked that somebody needs to check him. I think they're a little ticked off about that, and I think they think somebody needs to check him, and it would be them. And I think this case is going to do it. But so you know, even Thomas, who might think that the 14th Amendment was misinterpreted in Wong Kim Ark, I think he's going to lean towards the not believing. You know, or not, I think he's going to lean towards not agreeing that the president alone could fix that. That has to be done through Congress. So basically, he might be open to thinking about revisiting some old precedent cases, such as Wong Kim Ark, but he doesn't like the whole executive authority thing that Trump is trying to pull. So that leads on to Justice Samuel Alito, one of my favorites. Now, he's also a strict constructionalist, right? And he might examine jurisdiction. That's that whole, you know, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And to do that, he might want to look at, well, what did jurisdiction mean in 1868, which is when this constitutional amendment came out, and whether president truly controls here or not. But again, I think it's that executive power that's key. Allowing a president to redefine citizenship all by himself is kind of extraordinary. The prediction from the pundits is that he'll be skeptical of unilateral executive change. So that's not sounding too good. Gorsuch is also a strict constructionalist. He's ruled against executive overreach in the past. So the prediction is that he's likely to stick closely to the constitutional text. You know, he might not be in love with the prior case, Wong Kim Ark, but he'll stick to the constitutional text. So that's another one. You know, this could end up being a 9-0 case. It really could. Justice Brett Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh often emphasizes precedent and institutional stability. Again, another person who could very well vote with the liberals. He might ask questions like, has society relied on this interpretation for over a century? Yes, it has. He might be, out of the conservatives, I think he's probably the most concerned about overturning long settled rule. which, like I said, what was it, 125 years, 128 years, something like that, that this has been the law of the land. And last but not least is our friend Justice Amy Coney Barrett. But this woman has written extensively on stare decisis. Now, what's stare decisis? Stare decisis is simply, it's known as binding precedent. That when the U.S. Supreme Court, or sometimes even appellate courts, Circuit Court of Appeals, when they make a decision, that is binding precedent. And everyone below them has to do what this particular case says it has to do. So if SCOTUS decides to overturn Wong Kim Ark, that really screws up the whole stare decisis thing, right? And plus, not to mention that there's going to be all kinds of, reliance on that. Yeah, I mean, people just know that if you're born in this country, you're a U.S. citizen, and people have relied on that. And I don't mean anchor babies where the moms are coming in just to have babies. I have never had a client, never once did I have a client who came into the United States pregnant with the intention of having the baby here. I have had one woman who came in, a Salvadoran woman, who she was brought up by the coyotes, and one of them, at least, raped her, and she got pregnant, and she entered pregnant. But that was not her intention. So I'm not talking about people who decided to get pregnant and then come over here to get, to deliver over here. I doubt very much that somebody from Central America or South America or anywhere else on the planet, with the exception of maybe Mexico, would even think of doing something like that. But I don't know, maybe some Filipinas. I don't know. And for her it's probably some skepticism of ending birthright citizenship through executive order. Are you hearing a pattern, right? Because everybody keeps focusing on whether, all the ins and outs of this particular executive order, but you have to think like a lawyer, think like a judge. They're concerned about that stuff, of course, but they're not that concerned about other things, such as checks and balances. Which brings us to the chief of the Supreme Court, Justice John Roberts, right? Look, Roberts cares a lot about the court coming across as legitimate, which it has not in the past, by the way. But think about it. This court bears his name. It's known as the Roberts Court, right? He wants the court to appear apolitical, which I'll tell you what, that was a stretch even just a few months ago. But he certainly knocked Trump down a peg, which I also think is why Trump is a little bit worried about this, with their whole tariffs thing, when they said, these tariffs aren't going to fly. So he wants he wants people to believe in the court. He wants people to believe in the court, and he wants people to believe that it's apolitical. This would be a good place to show it. So what are we looking at? Possible outcomes. You got a 9-0 executive order invalid, narrow decision. I don't think that's impossible. Although we haven't had too many 9-0 decisions from this court, but I don't think that's impossible. 6-3, conservatives split but majority preserved. 6-3 ruling, which means that the conservatives split. Some of them go with the liberals and 3 of them don't. Which again means that this executive order doesn't fly. 5-4, that's where the court limits Wong Kim Ark. But I don't even see a scenario where that happens. I mean, it could. We're going to see tomorrow, because trust me, I'm going to be listening to this. I wish I could watch this hearing tomorrow, but I don't think they allow cameras in. But I think they do allow microphones, because I saw one. What was the decision a few days ago? It was only a week or two ago, where I saw the whole text of everything that was said. So I'm going to be very, very interested in what's happening with this. But frankly, I do not see any way that it goes 5-4. I really don't. I mean, who would it be? I don't see it. And then the last thing that was suggested was procedural dodge. I'll kill them if they do this. That would be tough. Procedural dodge. Case dismissed without reaching the court issue. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. There's been such a build-up to this. There's been a lot of people talking about it. I can't imagine that they would dismiss this case on some frickin' technicality, because a decision needs to be made. You know, a decision. You know, if Roberts wants to prove that this is a legitimate court, that they're apolitical, that they have some cojones, at least the guys do. Because all the women have more cojones than the guys. Just saying. I have to stop doing this. I have to stop doing all this political stuff, because my bias shows. Anyway, I just can't imagine. But most political pundits, people are talking about it, are thinking this is going to be either 1 or 2. 1 being 9-0 or 6-3, which I completely agree with that. Because, look, the issue isn't immigration. It's a whole lot bigger than that. It's about separation of powers. He overstepped. He's not allowed to just try and change the law just willy-nilly because he feels like it. So, here's my question to you. Is birthright citizenship permanently settled law? You have to put this in. You have to put a comment in before tomorrow, because you're going to have too much information after tomorrow. But what do you think? Is birthright citizenship permanently settled law? It should be. Or is the Supreme Court one vote away from changing it? I want you to drop your predictions in the comments. Oh, no, we have time to do this, because I don't know if I mentioned it to you. I put it in early in the script, that there won't be a decision until June. Okay, this is just for oral arguments. So yeah, you still have time to do this. Drop your predictions in the comments. Is it going to be 9-0, 6-3, or 5-4? You have time. You have a couple of months to do this. So do you think it's going to be 9-0? Do you think it's going to be 6-3 or 5-4? And what justice do you think would be the swing vote? What do you think? If you found this helpful to you, did you learn something new from it? If you want some additional deep dives into things, because this channel is more about, I mean, I started it as kind of a how to, how to file for your spouse, how to file for your sibling, how to file for whoever, how to file for asylum, blah, blah, blah. But I have found that so many people don't know what they're talking about, that I've decided to do it more about explaining things. For instance, I did a video, in fact, I'll include that as another one you can watch if you want to, on immigration terms that people get wrong. But so if this is the type of stuff that you like, that it's going to be about immigration, because that's my heart and soul. My name's Beverly Black. I've been an immigration attorney since 1992. I worked in the field of immigration as a para since '86. So I got many, many, many moons of doing immigration law. Plus I'm bilingual in Spanish. I lived a year in Costa Rica. I lived 7 months in Chile under the dictatorship. That was fun. So I have a lot of experience in this area, in I also do my due diligence to try and look things up and not just talk willy-nilly about stuff. So I hope you like it. I hope to see you again. Hit subscribe, hit like. It really helps a lot. And I'll see you in the next video.